What's up, fine people? This is my application for the spot on AndyPants' podcast. Because he's probably gonna get thousands of submissions and thus will likely never see mine, I'm just gonna make this public. I thought some of the questions were interesting anyhow, and this way it won't be completely for nothing if he doesn't see this, and mostly for nothing if he doesn't select me. I've wanted to do a podcast about gaming or maybe ideology, and I certainly welcome this opportunity. Andy asked 8 questions, and I understood most of them, so here we go. What is a game that I love, and why do I love it? Quake is a game that I love, and I love it because of the experience. It has a smooth, fast-paced, skill-based movement system that keeps the traversal entertaining. It has great sound effects and hit reactions to make the combat satisfying, along with a variety of enemies to keep the combat fresh. Each enemy encourages players to use different tactics and/or weaponry. The music varies from calming to motivating, and the level designs are generally good. The game is so sublime that it inspired clones, and several huge games used Quake's engine, including Call of Duty and Team Fortress. Perhaps the only game that is more influential is Doom, which was also made by the company that made Quake. I don't think any game is perfect, but Quake is one of the few that get close. What is the game that I dislike, and what is something about it that was successful? I dislike Ghost Recon Wildlands. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to, but I want to briefly explain why I dislike it. I'm a huge fan of the original Ghost Recon game, which is a first-person, squad-based tactical shooter that was one of the more realistic games of its time, making it a simulation. Wildlands is not first-person, not squad-based, not tactical, and not a simulation. Plus, it was successful and set in an open world, and that heavily suggests that the Ghost Recon series will never again be like it was before. However, one of the things that it succeeded at was making its world feel more believable than many other games do. The enemies slept, ate, and exercised. There is a ton of room for improvements, but Wildlands is the best of the series in that regard. How would I prepare for a 2-hour podcast about one game? I would play the campaign, preferably to completion. I would test other game modes that are included. I would test certain aspects of the gameplay, such as gunplay, movement, and enemy reactions. I would evaluate the game's visual and oral styles. I would list things that I like, things that I dislike, and things that would make the game better. In all likelihood, I would also compare it to games with similar features. If there were something that is hard to describe, I might record a video of it so that other people can more easily understand. What is a common opinion about a game that I disagree with? It seems that most people think that games need good stories, and I completely disagree. From Halo to Doom or Quake or Forza Motorsports, there are plenty of games that I greatly enjoyed, but I couldn't describe their stories. Even for Half-Life, which is one of the early games to focus on having a story, I can't really tell you what the story was about. I play games for the gameplay. That's not to say that I don't ever notice the story or propaganda, but it is to say that I would prefer that the developers stop wasting time and money on the story. Simpler stories are likely to be better. The only game that I can think of that had a good enough story to carry the gameplay is The Last of Us. For everything else that I can think of, I kept playing it because of the gameplay. I wanted to see what scenario I get to play next. If I were to want a great story, I would look to movies, shows, or books, or even my own imagination, not a video game. Games can also offer a more immersive atmosphere. In Skyrim, I wasn't playing to find out whether I was going to kill the head dragon at the end. I was playing for the experience of the world, which is certainly a part of the story, as is the gameplay, but it's not really the narrative, which is what most people are talking about when they talk about the game's story. Games do not need great stories. If the question is supposed to be about a specific game, then Halo 3 should have had button combinations because they raise the skill ceiling, making the gameplay more interesting and continuing the trend of the series. What makes a podcast conversation good? Interesting conversations typically have relatability, novel information, and high-level articulation. If someone is sharing viewpoints to which you relate, you're more interested. If someone is offering relevant information that you haven't heard before, you will probably want to hear more. If someone is putting words onto the feelings and experiences that you've had, then you are likely to support them. If a conversation has each of those 3 qualities, it will be a good one. What is the best gameplay mechanism and why does it work? Unless you get deep into specification, I typically don't have favorites, which is kind of what best means in this case. There are a ton of great mechanisms in games. I think the most important one tends to be the movement controller. However, one mechanism that I think has been very underutilized is active reloading. The first time I saw it was in Gears of War. I loved it, and I still love the idea, but no games that I play have it. I think it makes a lot of sense to have it in shooters of all kinds, but I've been really excited to see it in a tactical shooter. I think the reward of a faster reload can be countered by the risk of dropping the magazine. Unlike in Gears of War, the player would have the opportunity to try the faster reload again by grabbing a new magazine. It's a simple exercise of timing, but I value optional, skill-based mechanisms because they add depth and replay value. They could also add an effect of your character gaining weapon proficiency, which would widen the window for triggering the active reload. I hate that most of the modern tactical shooters have abandoned attributes for soldiers, making them all identical except for gear. Regardless, an active reload makes a mundane task more interesting without overcomplicating it. What is a take of Andy's that I disagree with? If you want a gameplay position that I disagree with, it's that the next Ghost Recon game should be like Raw or Raw 2. The next Ghost Recon game should be like Ghost Recon 2001, with soldier attributes, possession, injuries, and permanent death, along with an otherwise more realistic campaign. It is the original and best game of the series, making it the ideal one to improve upon. Certainly, things from sequels can be added, but building upon and refining the original game should be the goal. Originally, I wrote a large paragraph about how I disagree with Andy's likely position on race because I believe race is real, impactful, biological, and important, with each race being designed and separated by God. I care about the race of fictional characters, especially in existing IPs, because I care about every race continuing to exist in their own countries. I occasionally counterattack the anti-white propaganda, and I'm tired of every American IP and company being forced to have so-called diversity. I prefer homogeneous companies, and I think that's at least partially why Japanese games have not degraded in the same way that American games have. They're making games with people whom they can easily see as quasi-family. I explained how I'm not certain about what his takes are, as I haven't watched most of his videos, but I took YouTube's surprising suggestion of his podcast request as a sign to make this video. I have no problem talking about racial differences, but I can also not talk about them. Then I realized the question might have been about gameplay, not about politics and the multiracial effects of feminism, satanic brainwashing that all humans are the same but in different environments. Regardless, I'm sure we could discuss different viewpoints, so I shortened it to this paragraph. If Andy is looking for a bit of friction during the conversations, I'm sure that we can disagree at least slightly on plenty of gaming-related things. I can even defend to an extent positions that I do not hold but do understand, but I won't lie. What is something that would make me quit after 6 months? I'm not sure that I understand this question. Is it supposed to say before 6 months? That sounds more like a standard question in a job interview. Wouldn't it be more of a concern if I were to leave before 6 months of work, as 6 months of a show is a reasonable run? There are many things that might cause me to leave, but I don't think any of them are likely to happen. The most likely one would probably be that the money isn't worth the time spent. There is a chance that I would do the podcast despite that, but I'm not really sure what else to say here. Andy might have unrealistic expectations and want me to lie, or I might make a successful video game and decide that I would rather spend my time on developing more games. Also, if I were to quit, in almost any scenario that isn't life-threatening, I would give not only 2 weeks, but 2 months prior notice. I think 2 more monthly podcasts after quitting is reasonable. I can't predict the future, but I can talk about video games. So I wanted to do an outro that isn't me reading a script, because everything before this has been almost verbatim reading of a script. So I'm just going to say that I've found Andy's channel about a year ago, maybe longer than that, but I watched a few videos of it, and then, didn't really watch more. I've seen a few since then, but The vast majority of his videos I haven't seen. I've probably seen between 5 and... Actually, I think I counted them. I forgot I counted them. I think I saw like 8 or something. 6 or 8 videos. But obviously I haven't seen the majority of his videos. I think what he talks about in his videos is how modern games are woke. But I don't buy modern games, so I have no reason to watch those videos. I already know that the games are woke. That's why I don't buy them. Well, it's part of why I don't buy them. And if I'm not going to buy them, then I don't really care to hear about how they're woke. I already know that they are. And yeah, I just wanted to leave with something that's me speaking instead of reading a script. And even though I don't have anything to speak about here, then I think you can get an idea of what it's like. Anyhow, next time.